Thank you everybody for joining our webinar today. You may notice something a little different with the recording. First off, my apologies. While we were recording the hour-long webinar, something happened where the recording actually didn't save. So what we're doing today is we're going to do a quick little recap. For those of you that weren't able to join us, you're going to get an hours-long conversation wrapped up here in about 10 minutes. And unfortunately, Sarah wasn't able to join us today, but Richard, we were able to find some time that worked out to do a quick recording. So we're just going to jump into it, hit a couple of key points that were discussed. And if there are any questions or anything that comes up after, please feel free to reach out to Richard, myself, or even Sarah, and I know we'd be happy to answer some of those questions. So Richard, if it's all right, we're just going to jump right in, do a quick recap.
Yeah. Look, for those that missed it, it was greatness, and it was not recorded, so we have no proof that it was not great. So let me dive in. Look, ultimately, Dax, I think when I look at the title of this, I wanted to circle back to a couple of things that maybe just some tidbits that people can actually take away from the conversation. And one of the key pieces of the conversation in my mind, and kind of created a little bit of a mantra, which was don't manage trash based on price. If I could give you a quick tidbit or a piece of information that you can go back and execute on, it's work on negotiating terms that you're comfortable with for your company size. Things like, do we want CPI? Do we have levels that we're comfortable with paying on fees? And have all of those things kind of already pre-negotiated. It's sometimes very difficult to get your contract paper through with a supplier. But what you can do is you can actually have ideas, or even go into the conversation with, I'm looking to keep my CPI capped here, and I don't want to pay $225 for overage charges. I'd like to keep those capped at $100 per instance. Go through and work through and negotiate the fees, and try and go to whatever supplier or partner that you're working with and kind of give them those terms and say, now give me a price. I don't know if you ever remember when you go buy a car, they had that little Foursquare thing, right? They always try to hone in on the price, because then they could navigate the deal and completely, shape the deal with the other three items, your trade-in and interest rate and things like that. Kind of the same thing, right? If you're just basing this off of price and you're not looking at the full scope, you might think your monthly rate looks good, but when you start looking at that 30% fuel and all of those charges you weren't expecting, all of a sudden it's like, well, we're not saving the money we thought we were. So come up with a set of terms and conditions that you're comfortable with, or better yet, find a partner that you can, contractually navigate to where you have a consistent set of terms if possible, but go into the deal and discussions with those in mind.
Yeah, 100%. That's so critical. And we did a great job of covering that. For those of you that didn't see it, sorry you missed out. But that's a great summary, Richard. I wish Sarah was here, because she really had a great conversation about the transitioning of properties, and with her role, the director of transition within American Landmark, and what some things can happen if trash is not transitioned properly. Worst case scenario is there's nowhere for the residents to put the trash. That's a horrible first experience. Richard, I know you guys manage a lot of properties and are doing a lot of transitions. Any thoughts on the smooth transition other than what you've already talked about with the contract process?
Yeah, look, again, I would come back to try not to negotiate waste contracts property by property. I would say a good opportunity is, or here's what I see. I see companies come in and they try to negotiate these property by property, region by region. And then sometimes they'll use a broker. Sometimes they'll contract and negotiate with the haulers directly. Think of it as kind of an internal, external. The simple truth is trash is complicated. Talk to any procurement guy who's ever tried to jump into a contract negotiation for trash, and they're like, whoa, I was not expecting this. So I would tell you, pick a side, right? Either manage it internally with a resource that's knowledgeable enough to help you kind of put it together and do it internally, or find a partner and do it externally, but don't try to do both, right? Don't ride the fence. Pick a direction, because what will happen is once you pick a direction, you can continue to evolve the terms, the processes, and things like that. And you actually reach a far better place than if you're constantly trying to switch back and forth and do this and do that. That's just my take on the transitions. We fortunately have a transitions team that handles a lot of that. But on the trash side, we have our partner that when we transition, we bring them in and they provide a bid, and they're going to be a better price, or the price that's there is better. And we make a decision based on what the terms and, the overall deal looks like. And so I would say just kind of pick a side, pick a resource, and try to evolve that resource into something that can truly manage the transition for you.
Yeah, 100%. I speak with a lot of the Conservice clients, and it's very interesting when I jump on a call and I say, well, how is your trash managed today? Very clearly, the clients that they have a process, either they have somebody that helps them manage externally, they have a team internally that's been doing it for years. But it's always interesting when you get somebody on the phone and they say, we don't know, it just happens. And that's when it can get a little scary, to be honest. So I love that point of choose a path and then evolve from there. It's fantastic. One of the other things that we spent a little bit of time on was the importance of waste data. Richard, if it's all right, I'll jump in. I just want to share a couple of slides here. And really what I want to highlight is try and figure out what's happening in your portfolio. Richard, you talked a little bit about overages and contamination and understanding those charges from a contract perspective. I did a recent presentation for about 100 different clients of Conservice. And what we did is we just talked about waste data and ways that you should try and understand what's happening in your portfolio. So these are just some very simple examples. This bin right here was charged $225 from an overage fee because the bin was too full. Now the bin is clearly not full, but it is above the fill line of that container. And so how can we educate our property teams? How can we educate our maintenance teams to understand how and when these fines are applied? Here's an invoice that, every single time they come to the property, this property is paying about $2,000 worth of fines, where if you just took the time, you broke down the cardboard, and you apply just a little bit of TLC, you can drastically reduce the cost for your properties. Another example is here with contamination. This is a property in Minnesota. The recycling service charge is $555. The recycling processing charge is $200. So, excluding fuel and environmental, let's say this is a $750 recycling bill. And the problem is when you don't take the time to look at your bill and know what's happening in your trash charges, this is $216 per occurrence they're getting hit on recycling contamination. Like this will break a budget absolutely within your portfolio. And so the worst part is when this goes on for a couple of years and then you just start budgeting for this as your trash expense. We've actually seen that. And so from my standpoint, knowing your waste data and how to leverage that, how you can actually use that data can be super impactful for your properties. Get off my little soapbox for a minute, but Richard, leveraging waste data, anything that you wanted to say or mention on that piece?
Yeah, look, I would say for those who are not familiar with sustainability reporting, when you have your waste data, you have the opportunity to participate in the survey. So you can have all your utility and energy data and you get scored for that, but your score is limited based on your availability to participate in all the various categories. So as you add waste data, you drive the opportunity to improve the sustainability scoring and these benchmarking assessments. And so it's important in that regard. I know in our world, clients are more and more seeking that data. So we have found partners that can help us get that data into Energy Star. Look, I think Energy Star is kind of the Switzerland of waste data. And I think the future reads that more and more companies are going to expect you to work with providers that can help you get that data into Energy Star. Otherwise, our clients are left going out and paying third-party companies or things like that. So whether they're engaging a group like WasteX or, we engage our supplier actually as a push directly into Energy Star, start thinking about the waste data as a resource to drive your clients and your own sustainability metrics. Second to that, I would kind of reiterate, Dax, if you look at the billing that you just saw, had you gone in and negotiated some of those contamination and overage charges on the front side, And just think, if you said, maybe you weren't willing to pay the full amount, but maybe you negotiated $100 max. Think about the impact it had for that property at $100 instead of $216. So that's a really good example of going into the discussions with kind of your terms and conditions you're willing to pay, and try to see if you can get those. But you can't manage what you can't measure. And so I would say, outside of the sustainability reporting and the metrics in that regard, you also have the ability to manage the data. Managing waste data can be just downright overwhelming. What I would suggest is look for KPIs that you can engage that are fairly easy to manage. Overage charges, contamination charges are easy ones, right? But look for maybe yards per door or cost per door. Find a generic metric you can apply across your portfolio, and just look for outliers. Because if you try to fix the whole waste data thing all in one shot, you're going to get overwhelmed. But if you establish some metrics that allow you to say, look, here's some properties that are not performing well based on these KPI, and hone in on those locations and work on trying to grab the low-hanging fruit, if you will, I feel like that's a strategy that most groups can kind of get their heads around. And it's a good, effective use of the waste data. And you evolve that over time, right? You kind of start simple and you evolve it. And before you know it, you've got a pretty good process for keeping an eye on your waste spend.
Yeah, 100%. Take the top 5, whatever metric you're going to look at, take the top 5, work on those, and then repull the data and go to the next 5. Fantastic advice, Richard. The last thing before we wrap up here, if you wouldn't mind just touching quickly on maybe some of the new technology that's coming out. I don't know if you have any thoughts or opinions on that.
Yeah, so ultimately we're starting to see a lot of organics machines that are kind of dehydrators, smart bins, if you will. And look, I love this technology. I'll stay off my soapbox here, but if you think about where recycling is going, right, we are making it more restrictive to put things into the single stream recycling bin. It used to be like, take all the recycles and put them in there. That is getting more and more restrictive. And so we've never been good at that, right? Give them one bin and put it all in there, and we've still failed. Can look at those contamination charges you just saw, right? So as it continues to where we drive source separation, because that's what's going to happen, the commodity value of those materials is no longer worth a lot in a single stream. So it has to be broken out. As that continues to happen, it is going to get more and more challenging for us to offer single stream recycling and recycling in general. So at least in my mind, where I see the future going is if you look into the organic space, and not a lot of people know a lot about the organic space, but if you look to the organic space, it is truly the frontier of where we 1/10 of its original form factor and 1/10 of its original weight. Think about the impact that could have when you're talking about 300 residents. So love these organic smart bins. I think they have a significant impact on the overall amount of weight that comes out of an apartment community. It goes into a landfill. But I would say look for any of them that are able to reduce the volume, reduce the weight. There's a lot of unique ones out there. They're not economical for me yet because a lot of the subscription models, but I have just recently got my hands on one that is not a subscription model that allows for a fixed cost and can reduce that volume down to 1/10. And so love some of the smart bins. I will touch on the sensors stack, the IoT and sensors with cameras and things like that. I would say for multifamily, just temper your expectations. If you have an auto zone and you have a trash dumpster and a recycling dumpster, sensors can have a significant impact. And you hear those, oh, we reduced 40%. You might reduce 40% in that space. When you come into multifamily and you have multiple bins, multiple sizes, 10 different trash enclosures and multiple streams, the complexity around the data and actually being able to make a change, whether it be a smaller bin or bigger bin, it's complex. We don't have space. We have so many enclosures. And oftentimes what I found was by the time you paid for, delivery and removal of bins for swap outs, you chewed so far into your return that oftentimes the cost benefit analysis wasn't there. So look, I think when trucks are willing to just drive up to our property and pick up bins that are full based on sensor data, whenever, whatever magical world that is, it will happen eventually. I think I call it dynamic routing. Then I think we have a really good use case. If I'm looking at sensors today, I'm looking at a sensor to monitor a compactor. Those are always viable solutions. And I'm also looking at a monitor or a sensor that actually tells me, did the bin just get picked up? Right? I will also add, I don't know that the sensors with cameras are going to be a worthwhile effort, because I believe in the next 4 or 5 years that the companies like Waste Management and Republic, they already have cameras and sensors. They're already taking the photos. So do we really need those as this process evolves? And so that's just kind of my general sense on some of the things that are out there.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and I appreciate your insight, Richard. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up here. Just our quick summary. Again, big thank you to Richard and being willing to jump on here and share some of your wisdom. Thank you to Sarah and her recording with us the first time. Richard, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Dax.
All right.
Take care.